I would say it's having that infrastructure and then holding people accountable to the process. I feel like a lot of the times people don't respect until you inspect. And so if you're
Yep.
not holding people accountable to what you've laid out, then it's difficult for them to feel motivated to want to do the process if they don't
Yep.
think it matters or they don't understand the why behind it.
Well, hey, all of you out there, welcome again. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited for today's podcast episode. I've been now in the Utah tech space or the enablement space now for 10, 12 years. And someone who's someone I've always admired in the Utah tech space is Megan Prince, who is my guest for today. She is someone who has come up through the ranks from being an SDR and a sales rep herself, working all the way up through a leadership position to being an executive vice president of sales over at Weave. And now today she is the chief revenue officer of Zeni here in Utah and doing a phenomenal job of bringing up her team. Interesting enough, she does not have an enablement full-time person yet, but she is a very enablement-minded CRO, which I love to hear, and we'll dive into it as we go through the interview. But you'll see things like how she creates the environment to where people can learn and thrive and have a lot of support through their function, make sure that performance is there and accountability is there. So it's fascinating to hear what she's done in her own organization and what she's planning on doing next. And I think you'll enjoy it. Let's hop in. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. This is I, Coach K, Jonathan Carford, and this is The Gap by GT and Buddy. I am so pleased and very welcome to have a local legend. She may not think that way, but I do. Megan Prince, who is the current CRO of Zeni. Personal note before we jump in, I have been connected with you actually, I was going to look on LinkedIn when we first connected. It was a while ago, but it was when I was trying to connect with all the Utah talent. And you were one of the people that I had a friend of mine who was a salesperson said, you got to follow Megan. She's posting really good stuff. So I've been following you for a while, been following your career. So first off, I'm going to shut up. Megan, so good to have you. How are you?
I'm doing good, John. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate just being on the platform today. Excited
Yeah,
to.
I am stoked for it. So I was asked to find some CROs who I'd want to get their opinion on this topic of the gap between enablement and execution and what actually works in the field. And you were literally one of the first three people. I was like, I know this guy, this woman, and one of them is you. So I was like, I got to have her on. So you've had a crazy journey. You've been in sales for going from an individual contributor, working your way up through being a director and a VP, and now as a CRO. What I would love before we jump in is to have you dive in, if you don't mind, of the story of you that's not on LinkedIn and like just your journey of how you came from a salesperson to where you are now. That's okay.
Yeah, I would love to talk through that. So my background was originally door-to-door sales with a company called Vivint.
Mhm.
So I worked for 4 summers all over the place, Wyoming, Kentucky, Mississippi. I have
Yeah.
some crazy stories there, but I had
Right.
gotten from the summer one day. I needed a job and I had a friend hiring at a company called Weave. She worked in the onboarding department, but she knew
Mhm.
the sales leader was hiring and she gave me a tour of the building. I ran into the hiring manager and he had me start the next day as a BDR over at Weave. So I began
Nice.
me in 2015, started as a BDR, and then I was able to grow into an account executive, then a team lead account executive, and then a director. And then I ended there as a vice president of sales. So we had a team of about 200 reps and we were able to IPO, so lots of magical things happened along the way.
Right.
But yeah, that was my background over at Weave. So right after Weave is when I actually ended up leaving. I found a job over at a company called Zeni is where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
And I've been here now for 2.5 years, was brought on as the vice president of sales, specifically for the outbound skill set. And
Yeah.
then actually, I've been able to grow and develop here into the CRO role. That was 6 months ago.
I love it. Deserved, in my own opinion, just knowing you and seeing what you've done. A cool story because you came from, like you said, a BDR all the way up to CRO. Help people listening get inspired by that because I know a lot of people, when I enable BDRs, are always like, where's my career going? I'm like, here's an example of where it could go. You keep at it. Well, about this topic of execution enablement, before we dive into that, I'd love to know more about the company you're with and give us some context of like industry you go after and the pains you're solving. And because that way I can dive into, hey, like how are you executing on it? So give me some background context on the company and you.
Yeah, so Zeni is incredible. So Zeni was founded by Swapnil and Snehal. They're these two twin brothers. They're based in Palo Alto,
Mhm.
and this is actually their third successful startup. So previous to
Cool.
Zeni, they sold their last company to American Express for 150 million plus. Previous to previous success, they basically created the Spotify of India. So they had this massive track record of success where that was one of the reasons why I wanted to join Zeni was obviously the leadership, but then
Yeah.
the product itself. So what Zeni does is we do automated bookkeeping and accounting for startups specifically. So CFOs,
Cool.
CEOs for our target audience. And then what we do is we're essentially the one-stop shop for anything and all things finance related. So if you need obviously your books closed on a daily basis or
Mm.
monthly basis, that would be Zeni taking that on. If you're hiring for a controller or bookkeeper, we would take on that function. We do bill pay services, reimbursement services, CFO services. So
Cool.
you name it, and anything related to your finances is what Zeni would be able to take on. So
And
essentially, oh, yeah, you go.
go ahead. Go ahead.
What we do is we're a one-stop shop for anything that you're needing as far as FinOps talent and then FinOps processes as well as FinOps tools.
Awesome. My last company was very much not the same type, but I was in this world and industry, so I know how much it's needed. And you said the main criteria is more on the startup side. You're talking like series pre-seed to series C, or what's usually ideal?
Yeah, so we work with bootstrap founders up to Series D founders. What's most important about one of the aspects of Zenny is our dashboard, where it gives you daily insights into your finances. So you're able to see every aspect of the business that's happening in regards to your finances, and it's updated on a daily basis. So that would be the
Cool.
function of the dashboard.
So knowing that and also knowing the industry going after, it is not an easy process to go talk to a CFO or CEO about their finances because it's a tough market in general, but just the conversation itself is obviously not easy, which means that you as a leader have to make sure your team is equipped for these tough conversations. When you came in, like what was some of the challenges you saw as the leader and what did you do to, again, this gap between what you hope were happening, the theory versus the actual execution. What'd you do to change that or to or even upgrade, I should say, to upgrade that?
Yeah, so when I got brought on, there were 2 account executives that were remote, and then
Yeah.
we didn't have any BDR function whatsoever. So that was one of the primary reasons why I had been hired on was to build out an outbound motion as well as expand the sales team, specifically in Lehi, Utah area.
Yeah.
So what we did is we put together a hiring process as well as a plan in place to download leads, export leads to the BDRs, have BDRs call ICP lists that we're targeting
Mhm.
with the audience, where what they target is very specific. So we mentioned CFOs, CEOs, but then we're also going after people who recently raised a round of funding, who need to expand their FinOps team. They're held accountable to investors, so they need
Right.
an investor view dashboard. So yeah, just a few processes I would say circling back would be hiring process, you have your documentation that's needed, you have your training processes in place, you have your lead downloading and execution of the lead processes, and then
Mhm.
of course you have your closing process as well, and then
Yeah.
customer after that.
A lot of it's just kind of infrastructure then. It's like making sure they didn't have the infrastructure or process you implemented what works, basically. As you've grown, because you said that right now you have, I think, 30 AEs and BDRs. You've gone from two now to a larger team. What do you do to make sure that consistently that people are performing at a certain level? Because there's a difference between here's your process, go execute, and then making sure it's executed well. Like, how do you make sure that level is where you know it needs to be to have success?
Yeah, for me, it would be about having the process in place through utilizing tools like a Trainio, as an
Mm,
example. So we're recording our processes, we're documenting it, and then we are sending it out to the team as well as inspecting, making sure and ensuring that they're following the processes in place that we know works. So, yeah, I would say it's having that infrastructure and then holding people accountable to the process. I feel like a lot of the times people don't respect until you inspect. And so if you're
yeah,
not holding people accountable to what you've laid out, then it's difficult for them to feel motivated to want to do the process if they don't
yeah.
think it matters or they don't understand the why behind it.
Yeah. How do you as a leader make sure that gets, because obviously as you grow and get more leaders and the accountability can seemingly sometimes get harder. What do you do personally to make sure that stays intact?
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways of leading. So there's through carrots or there's through a little bit of a stick sometimes. So natural
Nice.
consequences. And then the way that I've found is most important to lead is just really starting with the why. So if people don't understand why something is important and the result that we're wanting from the process, then it's going to be hard for them to be motivated through an incentive like a carrot or disincentive like a stick. And so for me, once again,
Yeah.
it's important for them to feel connected to the why as well
Hmm.
as the company mission, make sure there's alignment there, and then holding them accountable, whether it's through reward or it's through another way.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I don't know if this would apply to just your team or in general, but like when you're an active voice on LinkedIn as a sales leader,
Mhm.
um, do you feel like there is a type of space in between the theory and then what actually gets used or practiced in the field on a day-to-day basis?
I believe that there is a gap in every team, and it's about uncovering that potential gap.
Right.
So I do believe that once again, people respect what you inspect, and
Yeah.
there's not an actual process being, put in place as well as that accountability piece. 100% things just slip through the cracks. So
Yeah.
for me on my end, an example of something we've done to implement accountability is we utilize a training platform. It's called Trainio, where we're able to upload our trainings into Trainio as well as our processes in place. And then we actually test the reps on the process and the knowledge that has been previously documented. So they
Yeah.
have to pass the test as well with no notes, where
Right.
some it takes them 5 to 10 times to pass the test, but after those 5 to 10 times, it's deeply ingrained in them. And then, of course, it's about that repetition. So following up in a quarter, as an example, just doing
Right.
spot.
What's your can I and I didn't ask this before, my apologies. What's your sales cycle? Is it like the enterprise motion of 6 to 9 to 12 months, or how long does it take usually?
It's 14 days right now.
Oh, fast, pretty
No
fast. Awesome.
to close one. Yep. So pretty quick.
Nice. I like that, so I'll take that any day. And I ask because, like, in either scenario, whether it takes longer or it's fast, like what yours is, there's a lot of times where you can't be in every location. The leader can't be in every conversation. So there's things that the team needs during the conversation or in motion of the deals. When it comes to this is my AI side, and fortunately, I can talk about AI and execution. But do you view AI having the ability to help enable in those type of circumstances so it's in context and doesn't take the time of a leader, but can still have the same impact? Do you see that kind of thing happening, or are you seeing anything like that?
I love that you're bringing that up just because another tool that we utilize for accountability as well is Avoma. So it's a recording
Yeah.
platform where it's able to analyze rep calls. So you can do product analysis, you can do overcoming objection analysis. We utilize Straightline for our sales methodology combined with
Yep.
challenge sale, where
Cool.
we're so able to do a spot check if the reps are asking or doing what we've asked them to
Right.
do with our process in place. So yeah,
Cool.
Avoma, an amazing tool for that is the tool that we utilize.
And I love you bring up the tools because this is like part of what I like to talk about. Is just like, what's the guts behind all this stuff. One thing you mentioned before the show, and I want to make sure we bring this into the conversation, is that this whole thing around execution, like you talked about the carrot and the stick, but there's also the layer over top of it all, which is the culture. Which
Mhm.
I know you would agree that leaders are directly responsible for the culture of the team. And for the people listening, I asked you directly, what would you consider your superpower to be? And I'd love to have you tell me what you told everyone else and give me some specific examples of you actually applying that. And also, not only the examples, but what have you seen the outcome be in performance as a result of it? If that's okay.
Yeah, I would love to talk through that. So, a couple of superpowers that I think that I have, and people might correct me if they think I'm wrong over here, is
Right.
I say recruiting and hiring is one of my specialties,
Mhm.
as well as making it feel like people are cared about on the team. So, an
Yeah.
example of spotting talent for me would be I'm going to the salon and I noticed this girl who's up front, and she is absolutely crushing it with the customer experience. So she's super detail oriented. She's
Yeah.
trying to cross sell them on a tanning lotion. She's moving quickly, cleaning the room. She's super polite. And I actually ended up hiring her as a BDR1 here at Zeni because I spotted her urgency. She was caring, she was kind, she was asking for the sale, she was coachable, where I knew that would translate very well over to Zeni and specifically for BDR talent. So yeah, she's been here now a year. She's been able to grow from a BDR1 to a BDR2, and then she just got promoted 2 months ago to a
Yeah.
BDR3. But yeah, I would say spotting talented reps as well as leaders, bringing them in and then developing them. And then the other portion would be once again making people feel like they are cared about. So if somebody has a birthday, we have birthday cards. We're putting things together for that person that we know they may like.
Yeah.
Somebody has a baby on the team, we all rally together, we pitch in, we put together a baby basket. If somebody bought a new house, then we're making sure that we're celebrating that huge win with that person. So yeah, I would say it translates whatever exciting thing is happening outside of your life. We want to make sure that inside of Zeni, it's also celebrated.
Yeah. I have to tell you that the thing that you're not speaking that it's pretty obvious with you is that when you talk about the talent and the celebrating actual things outside of work, it shows you care, which seems like a kind of fluffy thing, but it's a big deal when you have even a VP or a C-suite level person who actually takes this a second to say, "Hey, good job," or "Congrats on your house," or like actually cares about the human connection. That means so much. I had a boss once where I had a death in the family. I wasn't expecting anything, and he sent me like this cool care package with some soup and a thought. And he didn't have to do that, but it meant so much that he actually took a second to say, outside of work, I care about you, and I'm sorry you're going through this. Or on the good side, where you say, hey, you got a house. That's awesome. Here's a housewarming gift. Like just stuff like that is things for me that adds to the culture that makes an inner motivation. If I was one of your reps, you did that for me, I'd be like, I'll run through walls for you because you're willing to see me in places that most people don't see me. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that's awesome, which you can't I didn't wanna ignore that because when we talk about execution, I think that's a big part of it is like, what will people execute on for? What's the why? Sometimes it's the reason, and sometimes it's the person just believing in you as a leader. If and I hope you don't mind the compliment, but I just wanna say that's awesome, and I'm glad you're doing that. One thing you mentioned too is that right now you said you do have, obviously customer success, and you're overseeing pretty much the customer journey. BDRs, sales, customer success, RevOps, but you don't have an enablement function, which is fine because there's a lot of teams I know personally that don't have one, but someone is over the enablement workflow. So without having an enablement person, which again, I don't know your team better than anybody, how do you make sure that enablement function or execution or performance improvement is being done without a person looking over it?
It can't be done from my perspective without a person looking over it to make sure people are held accountable. So I
Yeah.
would say even right now with the sales enablement aspect or the company enablement aspect, it would be me going into Trainio, sending out the test to everybody, and then me also going in, making sure they pass the test, making sure that everybody's following the deadline that has been given. Me, right now, it's very manual is how it feels on my end, and I don't
Right.
have answer for that, unfortunately. I wish I
Yeah.
did.
No, it's okay. I can't say how many teams I've talked to that for whatever reason, the person's a little overkill, which I understand. But I'm always curious, like enablement's happening, whether there's someone hired for it or not. So I'm always curious, what are you doing to oversee it? I guess my other question would be more broader, and I'm going to deep dive afterwards, but more of a broad question. For you as an individual rep, I'm going to talk about that first. When you're out in the field and you're actually selling,
Mhm.
what would be good enablement for you in that perspective? And now that you're a leader, what is enablement now that you're a leader? Does that make sense? So those two views, individual and then your leader view.
Yeah, so as an individual contributor, I think it's important to be shown. So if you have a leader who is telling you how to do everything but can't show you, then for me that
Right.
was always a red flag as an individual contributor. So for me, it was about seeing that it is possible through my leader or a direct mentor, and then once again replicating what that leader was able to do or that mentor was able to do. Yeah, I would say it's that, show me, don't tell me mentality that I
Yeah.
think makes successful teams and orgs.
So in essence, if I can repeat back, make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So I really want to pin this point down because I want to ask you some questions. Basically, it's saying you're giving them a standard, showing them a standard of what that looks like, so they have something to shoot towards. Because otherwise, they're just going all over the place. And then having the ability for you as a leader to communicate the steps in between where they are and where good looks like. Basically, okay,
Exactly. You're showing them what good looks like, and then you're holding them to what good looks like.
got it. Okay, good. I love it. So when I always talk about enablement, I always talk about it from either a change management perspective or literally performance improvement. So whether it's coaching, AI, content, whatever the case is, like my whole goal is performance improvement with the end goal of making a better customer experience.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if I can't affect that, then I'm not doing my job. But I'm curious from your point of view, if you had, I know you're doing a lot of things manual now, but as a CRO, what would be like your wish list of things of saying, if I could enable the skills and abilities of my team and not have it be manual, what would that be?
It would be having the ability to replicate our top performing reps
Mhm.
through a process and through, yeah, training repeatability. So it would be just being able to replicate them. And then ideally, I would love to have somebody who is over enablement,
Right.
just because I do feel like people learn better from a person versus from a slide deck or from,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
from a document that we're sending on over. So, yeah, it would
Yeah.
be somebody who is able to own that aspect and then once again, train on it, implement process, and then hold people accountable to it.
I love it. For the audience who are naval leaders, when you did hire that person, do you feel like that it is a strategic function, that role?
I do believe it is a
Yeah.
strategic function, which is also a necessary function. I feel like sometimes the word strategic gets thrown around where
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have the best reputation. But the reason why I think it is important is once again, if they're overseeing all department enablement across the board, then people respect what you inspect and it will hold them to that higher standard.
I love that you keep repeating that because like when it comes to one thing I love to nerd out on is coaching specifically. And
Mhm.
honestly, I think half of the reason why coaching works is because of the accountability when it's done well. Because it's like going to the gym with a partner and you have someone keeping you accountable. Like you show up just because someone's keeping you accountable, which I love. So for you with next steps, and I'm not talking about a person per se, but more of like enablement. When you see your team growing to the next level, how do you see scaling your team and making sure that this gap in between the theory, like you have this documented, you have what good looks like, but then there's the actual application of it out in the field. What that you're wanting to make sure is top of mind for you as that continues the growth with making sure it keeps happening.
Yeah, so for me, it's about that repeatability with reps, sales reps specifically. So if you
Yeah.
have a process in place, you're implementing it, but let's say they're not actually executing or taking that feedback and, yeah, repeating it on a daily basis,
Yeah.
then what happens is they're going to revert back to how they previously were trained from a different organ, or people
Yes.
will really revert back to the comfortable thing to do. So, yeah, for me, it would be about having somebody obviously do the process, documentation, the training, but then doing the role plays with reps, making sure that people are up to date on their product knowledge, but then up to date and they feel comfortable asking for the close over and over again, overcoming objections over and over again. So, it's really that person once again, or that process or that thing holding the reps accountable. I think what's difficult and maybe what's missing in the sales enablement or training enablement realm, that person or that thing to hold them accountable. Where I think if it's a AI holding somebody accountable, or it's, yeah, a training saying that you got 95% so you failed your test, holding them accountable, it's not the same as having somebody sit down and say, "Hey, listen, you missed XYZ. Here's the gap. Now I need you to close the gap. You have one more chance." That's much
Yeah.
more scary than, yeah, a platform popping up saying you failed at 9%.
Yeah, there's both sides. Like I'm very much in the AI space and I love what it can accomplish. But to your point, having analytics from how someone's practicing, and I think there is power behind the practice, but then when it comes to actually getting down and making sure that someone's speaking the right way you want to speak. That's a different beast that AI can't. It can tell you that you may have been graded, but it's not going to tell you the same thing you would as a leader who's been in sales for 10 plus years, who knows what you're doing. You mentioned the two methodologies. I'm curious, like one of parts of enablement for me is making sure the methodology is not only being followed, but it's effective. And you mentioned straight line, which I think is Jordan, right? Jordan. And
Exactly.
then Challenger, which I love both of them. You have it obviously documented. Do you have, or would you ever go on a call yourself and be like, let me show you how this is done? Show them what good looks like? Or like, what's that thing you do? Is it them role playing with their leaders or them role playing with you to make sure they can have that repeatability? What are you doing now to make sure that gets executed so they're not going back to old stuff? Make sense?
There are a few different things that we have in place. One would be scripting. So we show them what good looks like. We have our own script, and then we give the reps the autonomy to incorporate their tone on the script that they've been given. So have that ability. And then we do weekly role plays as well. So overcoming objections role plays as an example. We have training every single day for new reps on overcoming objections. And then for reps that have been here for 6+ months, that's where they're still required to do a weekly role play with somebody else on the team. On top of that,
Cool.
what we also do are weekly call reviews. So we have a weekly call review where it's a self call review. And then we do have a weekly call review where they're analyzing what a peer is doing
Mm,
really as well as areas of improvement for that peer. Sometimes I feel like reps specifically take better feedback from a peer who's in the role, they're doing it on a daily basis, they know what works, know what doesn't work, versus if the manager hasn't sold in a while or they haven't hopped on the phones in a while, they don't take that leader as serious, if that makes sense, with the
yeah.
feedback.
I love peer to peer stuff. I think it's like the best enablement sessions I've ever done were the ones where I got out of the way and gave them space for the peers to talk to each other. Because a lot of times they're so busy selling, they never have a chance to see what someone else is doing or hear another view. And I'm like, the gold is all right here. I don't need to do that. I just need to give them the time and space to have to collaborate and get some feedback. Curious then, like how you as a CRO, if I was in your shoes, which again, you're smarter than I am with this because I'm not. But if I was, my concern would be, how do I know that the people and peers are holding people accountable to that level that I know is good? Because maybe my standards here, their standards here, and so they're saying, yeah, you're good, but they're not getting them up to that point. How do you make sure that again that gap of it's got to hit this level, it's not going to be good enough, so you're not like enabling mediocre behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that you're bringing that up because we also do group call reviews as well as group role plays. So,
Yeah.
as example, this last Wednesday, we did a sales negotiation training and I paired two BDRs together where they had to role play what was just taught in front of the entire team. And then, same thing with the account executives where we had them role play out the close and it was in the entire front of the team. And so, that's how we
Cool.
do spot checks where we'll also do group call reviews, we'll do peer to peer, and then self call reviews. But it's that accountability piece where usually what we'll try to do is pair somebody up who is hitting their quota, they're exceeding their quota, they're crushing it with
Yeah.
somebody a little bit newer. So that way they know what good looks like because this person is implementing what we're teaching. And that's why they're one of the top performers.
I love that. I appreciate let me ask the question because I'm a nerd. What I like to say, what is it exactly is happening? I'm just diagnosis a little bit, but what I'm hearing is essentially weekly, you're pairing people up in whatever process you pair people up, and they're able to role play a particular thing, get feedback from themselves and from a peer. Do you as a CRO, I'm assuming you have a list of people or people rank based on performance and personality, and then you place them in specific people's, okay, medium performer needs some help, top performer, match up and go. Do you do that kind of thing that methodical or is it just random? Let's just see who gets who and go with it. What do you do?
It's definitely methodical where I believe we have synergy with specific people, and not everybody is going to love each other and,
Yes.
succeed
Right.
uh, to the best possible outcome. And so for me, it's about matching up people who might have similar interests and personalities where it's important to be happy inside of work, but then also important to feel like you're developing those friendships as well as
Yeah.
being happy outside of work. And so if I am pairing somebody up, I do want to make sure that they have something in common is what I'll typically look at and then I will typically pair up, let's say, a newer BDR with an all-star account executive where I know that AE will take interest in that BDR and help them progress to the next level. So for me, it's not just
Cool.
about leadership, so management being, yeah, making sure that we're taking care of the team. It's about those AEs also taking on leadership roles and mentoring the BDRs to replicate what good looks like.
What I'm hearing from you that you're going to be probably shy and humble about, but is that you're very, what I would say, enablement minded as a CRO, which not everyone, I can tell you from experience, is not that minded. So it is, I can see why you don't have an actual person running this because you're doing a lot of it as part of your environment that you're creating as a leader, which I love because that's essentially what it should be is like, what is the ecosystem that someone lives within and is it supportive of high performance? Because otherwise, it's not just a training manual. It's not just a deck. It's what's the thing they come to every day that can either enable them for excellence or bring them down to misery and despair. So again, my compliments to you on that, which is awesome. What one last thing for you, and I guess would be leave the audience with, I'm sparking this one last minute, but I'm just curious. If you were going to recommend to another CRO, regardless of size of team, whether it's 300 reps to five, what are some tips that you would say as a leader to make sure that you are both having a pulse on the specifics of the day to day, what people are going through, but yet keeping a high level overview? We got to make sure we're going the right direction as a leader like yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, so you have the end result of where you want to land with your revenue number, but then what a lot of people forget is the process that it takes to get there. So for me, it comes down to the activities as an example that the BDRs are performing, the AEs are performing on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
then even before that, it's making sure that the team is happy and mentally in the right spot to perform. So for me, it's more about making sure that we are creating a culture where people are happy to come to work. And then we start looking at the process. We start looking at the accountability with the process, which ultimately leads to accountability with the number. So, yeah, I would
Yeah.
recommend whatever you can do to make people feel excited and a part of the team, like priority number one for me. And then priority number two would, of course, be enabling the team with tools to help them achieve the outcome that they're wanting. So, as an example, we utilize Orem for the BDRs, where it does have AI incorporated. They're able
Yeah.
to dial 6 people at one time. So that way they're more efficient with their time. And then on top of that, utilizing Trainio, where we're able to repeat and scale a current process that we have in place.
I love it. And also, again, like you said before, many times, it's just the accountability piece, making sure you have a system where the accountability is happening consistently.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. So I now get to see a little bit of the underneath the hood, so to speak, of what you're doing, which is awesome. So Zeni.ai is the website. And then what's the best way if people want to reach out to you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, definitely reach out on LinkedIn. It's just under Megan Prince, and I would love to connect.
Cool. Love it. Megan, thank you so much. I look forward to this. I can just tell you, I appreciate very much your time and your thoughts. So thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it as well.
No problem.
Thank you for tuning in to The Gap by GTM Buddy. For the latest AI tech in helping your teams execute with just-in-time enablement that converts and creates revenue, go to gtmbuddy.ai.